Welcome to In Her Voice. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am passionate about helping women live authentically by listening to their inner voice. Get ready to be inspired by women of all walks of life that have set aside their should-bes and not good enoughs and are standing in their true voice, the voice of wisdom that each and every one of us has inside. Hi, you guys. This is Kelly Covert, and you're listening to In Her Voice. Thank you so much for pressing play today. I have an amazing guest on with me, Brigid Dineen, and we are talking about setting healthy boundaries. And, there's a lot of talk out in the self-development world about boundaries and how important they are and how much we need them. But what I love about this conversation is it goes into a completely new way to look at boundaries and also some really practical, doable things to help you set them and to help you understand how to begin to create boundaries that are going to allow you to grow and allow you to feel good and allow you to live the life that you want. Now, before I get into that, I want to remind you that if you don't know this already, I have a newsletter that goes out periodically, I would say every other week or so. And I love to send an email out to you guys to let you know what's going on in my life, to drop a little bit of inspiration into your inbox and to really just stay connected with you. I love it too because did you know when you get an email from me, if you respond, it actually comes right back to me. I think sometimes people think, well, like if I respond back to this email, where does it go? It comes right to me, and I love hearing from you. So if you are not on my email list yet, you can get on it. It's super easy. All you got to do is go to kellycovert.com/newsletter, and you can put your email in and then choose the things that you're interested in hearing about from me. Maybe you would love to hear more about Beauty Counter and how to support In Her Voice through Beauty Counter. Maybe you want to hear more about my next mastermind that's going to be coming up in the fall. Maybe you just want to stay connected with what's going on within Her Voice, or maybe you want to hear about all of those things. You can pick and choose. So kellycovert.com/newsletter. All you need is a name and an email, and you are on it. And thank you. I always love staying connected with you guys. So, Brigid Dineen and boundaries. Oh my gosh, you guys are going to love it. Let me read you her bio. Brigid Dineen is a resilience coach for women on a mission. Through her one-on-one coaching, online courses, workshops, she helps women learn how to say no without feeling guilty so they can reclaim their time, energy, and peace of mind. Brigid believes in a world where well-being comes first. She draws from her extensive background in yoga, meditation, coaching, and fitness to help her clients embrace self-care and cultivate healthy boundaries so life can feel as good as it looks. Brigid is also the host of the podcast Guts and Grace, How to Create Space for Yourself in a World That Would Rather You'd Stay Small. Ugh, like so good, right? Guts and Grace, yes. Creating space for yourself, yes. Playing big, yes. Setting boundaries, absolutely. So sit back, relax. We're going to dive into this conversation about setting healthy boundaries right now. Well, hello there, Brigid Dineen. Thank you so much for being on In Her Voice with me today.
Well, hello, Kelly. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited. And we did a little flip-flop. I was on your podcast in July, I think it came out. And so I'm excited to have you on today to talk with us about boundaries, because that is what you love to talk about.
Yes, it is. It's my passion for sure.
Well, so let's talk about how it became your passion, because I feel like all of us who are living and breathing our passion on a daily basis, like got there in an interesting way. So what's the story? Mm-hmm. Why did boundaries become the thing that you are very passionate about living with and helping other people live with?
Yeah, well, I like to call it my feminism in action. And when I say that, I basically mean, looking at the world and all the work that I've done with women, I've noticed these trends where, we have difficulty kind of naming our desires, giving ourselves permission to have them in the first place. And we have difficulty speaking up for ourselves as well very often. And of course, that's not every woman, but many of us do struggle with these things. And I think a lot of that has come from the way we've been socialized, our rules about what it means to be, quote unquote, a good girl, or a perfect woman. And it really holds us back in life. And I find that kind of when I distill it right down to its very essence, I've really found that boundaries are the thing, being able to distinguish what is our responsibility versus someone else's responsibility, not trying to micromanage somebody else's reaction to our desires, for instance. All of these things are really important skills to have in order to be able to live life on your own terms instead of trying to live on leftovers. And so of course, I've observed this in people that I've worked with in the various iterations of my career over the years. And of course, you've got to live it to give it. So the reason that it jumps out at me so much, and the reason that that's the lens through which I can really view a lot of this stuff, is because I've got way more than my 10,000 hours in terms of practicing healthy boundaries myself. I used to not have them, or they weren't very clear, they weren't very healthy. Like many women, I was sort of like an overgiver, feeling responsible to be everything to everyone. And that left very little time, energy, money, resources in general for my own desires. And so over the years, there's been like this slow awakening about what life can look like when we decide to put ourselves on the priority list and actually stand in our power and recognize that we do have choices to make and that there are skills that we can learn in order to be able to carve out that space for ourselves in a world that maybe doesn't necessarily hand us that space and instead tries to back us into a corner or keep us small and quiet.
Okay, there's so much here, and my mind is swirling around a gazillion questions, as always.
Yeah.
And so one thing that stuck out to me was you talking about desires and how in our society it's almost as though we shouldn't have any or we're not allowed to voice them. And I'd like to unpack that a little bit because I think deep down we know what we want. But why do we not acknowledge that?
Good question. It's a biggie, right?
Yeah.
Like, why not? Yeah. One thing I've observed or, really experienced in my work with my clients and just in conversations in general with women, including my friends and family, is that we really think that we shouldn't complain, especially for those of us who do have a certain amount of privilege in life. There's this idea that we should be totally satisfied with what we have and have a bright, shiny smile on our face at all times and just be satisfied with what we've got. And of course, that can be a lovely thing. It's wonderful to practice gratitude, and it's so important definitely to have that perspective where we understand, that when we are blessed and, being able to lean into gratitude like that. But I always say not at the expense of actually having desire and acknowledging your own desires, because I see so many women over the course of their lives very quietly start to become more and more of a wallflower, not really claiming their own interests anymore. Their own things that bring them pleasure go on the back burner because they're so busy taking care of other people and putting other people's needs first. And so I think that there's definitely a little bit of socialization around the role of women and what it means to be a woman, whether you're a mother, a partner, or even in the workplace. Very often there can be some gendered implications for what types of roles women play, especially doing a lot of emotional labor and doing a lot of behind-the-scenes supportive work. And so I feel like deep down we're kind of compelled to try to live up to that particular image, even for those of us who consider ourselves, feminists and trying to move ourselves forward as a culture. Still somehow there's this subconscious kind of a thing that happens that keeps us stuck in those roles, and the voice in our head that says you shouldn't complain and you should just be grateful kind of supports that and keeps us in that lane.
I think this is really interesting, the word complain and the word dissatisfaction, because I feel that they're two different things, right? So we can be dissatisfied and we can complain. And what that says to me is we're just voicing the dissatisfaction. And I think that the point where we need to sort of have the aha moment is there's nothing wrong with the dissatisfaction. Really, it's information for us that can point us in the right direction. But complaining is not taking action. Complaining is just voicing that dissatisfaction. And I'm not a fan of complaining for that reason, because I feel like it's not coming from a place of power. It's not coming from a place of action. But here's where the boundaries come in, right? Because when we begin to set healthy boundaries around our own desires, that is taking action. That's taking the power back into our hands. And so, absolutely, like, let's talk about this connection between boundaries and desire, because I think that that's not something, like, I think on an everyday level, if someone says, let's talk about boundaries, they're talking about saying yes and saying no, and they're not really attaching that to desire.
Okay, that's an interesting point. I'm excited for where this is going.
Good.
But first of all, I just wanted to say that I really love the way you put that, the way you're parsing out the difference between complaining and actually just giving voice to your dissatisfaction. Because, like you said, I can feel the power in the latter, you know. Yeah. But I think that especially as women, because there's so much messaging around how we're allowed to present our opinions and that sort of thing, even just voicing our dissatisfaction, sometimes we get the feedback from the world that looks like complaining. And so I think that we've got a not so healthy relationship to the idea of giving voice to our dissatisfaction, and we're automatically kind of lumping a lot of that in with complaining. But like you said, when you're ready to attach that to taking action, it's a game changer. It's a completely different ball of wax. And like you said, you move from complaining to actually taking effective action in your life and owning your own sovereignty, which is at the end of the day is really kind of the foundational important thing to do in order to be able to be satisfied and to have a life that, you know, feels as good as it looks. So we were saying we're making the connection between desire and boundaries, and I think that's a really important one to make too. You've got so much insight already just in the way you're reflecting some of these ideas back, and I think that's absolutely true. Is that we don't necessarily think of these two things as being linked. But one thing that I noticed in preparing for this conversation is that in every single story that I was, recalling to be able to share with you today in terms of like mining my own life for stories around boundaries and that sort of thing, every single one is attached to desire. And what I noticed is that anytime I claim my desires and go after them, it requires me to have boundaries. It requires me to say I am worthy of taking the resources required in order to pursue this. I am worthy of shifting the dynamic in my relationship if that's what's required. And I'm actually going to give myself permission to go after it. And that requires boundaries on a deep level because, like you said, it's not just about saying yes or no to requests that are coming at you. It's a matter of proactively carving out time and space and maybe money for yourself in order to be able to do the things that really resonate with you. And so it's absolutely very strongly linked together, desire and boundaries for sure.
Can you share one of those stories with us where you really felt that your own setting of boundaries was a deep reflection of what you most desired?
Absolutely. So one of the stories that pops out to me when I think about desire and boundaries is actually back when I called off my first engagement. in my early 20s. I got engaged to my high school boyfriend, and I was sort of, just letting life take me where it was going. It had its own momentum, and I felt a little bit like I was living on autopilot, or just falling into decisions rather than being really proactive about them. And as I look back, I recognize that it's because I wasn't really listening to my inner voice yet. I didn't really have a sense yet of what that meant. And so I was in this relationship. I think we were together for about 6 years at the time. And I found myself in this pattern where I was very supportive, right? So I was the primary breadwinner at that point, and I was putting a lot of my resources towards supporting my then fiance's aspirations. So giving him contributions to make films that he was in the process of writing and directing and that sort of thing, and paying for living expenses beyond the 50-50 split, and that kind of thing. And so what really made the difference for me is when I realized, you know what, I've got some dreams of my own too. And in particular, I'm also a singer-songwriter, as you know, and I wanted to really kind of give that a go. You know, I hadn't given myself permission to do that up until that point. It was just a hobby. And specifically, I wanted to buy myself a guitar, like a good one. I had one that I bought a few years earlier, and I really, I wanted to give myself that gift, and I wanted to make an investment in myself. And so that would mean I had less money available for other things, meaning like his cell phone bill, stuff like that. And so that, even just claiming that and owning that, started this kind of cascade of events that really revealed to me where the imbalances in our relationship were, and how this relationship was not going to support my own sense of growth and thriving. And it wasn't built for me to fulfill my dreams. It was really just going to be built for him to follow his passions. And so boo to that. No, thank you. And so, over time, like it sort of revealed itself that he wasn't supportive of that idea. And we got to the point that I said, wouldn't it be great if we could start our marriage off on a more equal footing? So maybe we need to press pause on this, because if it's going to mean that I can't, do things that I'm passionate about, maybe I don't want to spend this much money on like paying for our wedding right now. And then things really quickly fell apart. So it became clear to me that it was time to move on. And it was a matter of, like, as soon as I started stating my desires, I didn't have to make too many other decisions, really, because it just became clear that, it was kind of a house of cards. Mm-hmm. And really, if we have relationships that aren't going to support the pursuit of our own desires, then I think that's something that we need to take a look at, and decide if that's a sacrifice you're willing to make. I know for myself, I certainly wasn't. And so, in that way, tapping into my own desires, insisting on pursuing things that resonated with me, and using my own resources to do it, was the thing that made it so that I moved on. And now I'm happily married for almost 10 years to somebody else. And it's led to some wonderful different opportunities as well. I actually met my current husband when I was recording music. So he came and worked on my project with me. I ended up singing tons of open mic nights around the city. I eventually joined a band and did that fun thing for a while. And now I even have a song in a feature film.
Oh,
so
cool.
None of those things would have happened, right? I mean, it still would have just been a hobby that I never pursued, and I wouldn't have stood on a stage, and I wouldn't have experienced all that stuff that brings me so much joy and really, really does fill me up.
Yeah, I love that story. And you know what else I love about it too is that time in your life and that relationship is still so integral to the work that you do. Like, you had to be in that relationship in order to learn this lesson. Mm-hmm. And what a beautiful thing that is, even though I'm sure at the time it was very difficult. Now looking back, it's like, now you have this, like you said, you lived it. You understand what it's like to say, this is what I really want, and mm-hmm. I'm going to set some boundaries around that. And what a beautiful thing that is. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And
my pleasure.
What struck me is that I think so many women on this earth really have a heart of service. They, like you said, they want to help people, and they want to make things easier for people. And that is a beautiful thing, and we need that. But it's interesting to me that in those same women, many of them, it's so hard for them to serve themselves. Mm-hmm. And, there's this idea that when we do that, even the word self-serving, it feels selfish. It feels negative.
Yeah, and there's that connotation.
Right. How do we begin to find the balance point of that, because I do think there is such a thing as being selfish. I mean, that's true in the negative sense. How do we find the balance point of sort of making ourselves a priority and setting those boundaries, but still being open and still being giving and not denying that we want to be a person of service?
I think this is such an important question, because I think for so many of us, we assume that it's black and white. So I think that embedded in what you just asked is, we notice that we've got the fear to start in the first place because we think that means that we're going to be selfish, or we don't have a sense of what balance might look like. Therefore, if we start in the first place, then that just means that that we're going to be all about ourselves. And we don't have that many examples for many of us in terms of our lived experience of women who do strike that balance and are unapologetic. We have this image of like the women who, am I allowed to swear on your podcast?
Sure, go for it.
We have this image of the women who don't give a fuck, or who give no fucks. And it's funny because for myself and for so many of my clients, it's like there's this secret part of us that really wishes we could be that woman, like a totally carefree hippie who's like, I'm just going to do me.
Yes. Okay, but then, can we let's just stop and talk about this for a minute, because I think that you hit something so deep right here, is that secretly we're all jealous of the woman who says, yeah, I'm just going to do whatever the hell I want to do. And that right there, ladies, I'm just pointing this out, that is your inner voice talking to you.
Boom.
Right? Like that level of dissatisfaction, and even sometimes you may get triggered by people like that.
Yeah.
You need to sit with that, and you need to think about what that means for you and what that means you really want. Okay,
absolutely.
That's all.
Yeah. I love that PSA. Very important.
We can continue now.
Can you remind me the question that you asked right before that?
Well, so how you were talking about how it's not black or white. Yeah. It's not like if you decide to do to make yourself a priority, that now you're only going to be selfish and you're not going to be able to serve anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. So so the way that I like to approach this, and the way that I approached it in my own life, is really through baby steps. So for instance, in the story I just told, you noticed that I wasn't like, oh, fuck off, we're done. I'm not going to, I'm not interested in doing any of this stuff. I'm going to live for me, and you can either catch up or get out. That wasn't my approach. It was over the course of many conversations. It's like I presented one idea and then, took in the response, noticed the impact of that. And perhaps if he had responded differently, which really would have meant he was a different person, but if he had responded differently, there may have been some middle point in between where it didn't turn into breaking up, for instance, right? But at the end of the day, once you start taking baby steps, then the path will reveal itself. So you don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to blow up your life. And in fact, I don't usually recommend doing that. I mean, if sometimes people feel motivated to do that, it feels like an essential thing where you've got to make a giant step all at once, and that's wonderful. But it's not the only way. And so in my work with my clients, we talk a lot about just taking baby steps. So we find areas of life that feel like they're lower stakes, and start to kind of claim our desires in those areas. So for instance, like a few ways that I find many women, I'm going to use a term that I learned from Harriet Lerner. She's a PhD with a book called The Dance of Anger. She calls it deselfing. And this is basically where women start kind of deferring to other people and not, like we said, not owning their desires, not owning their opinions, and just kind of going with the flow. And so some very small ways that I see that happening is like people not listening to music that they like and just listening to whatever other people are listening to, or not choosing a TV show or saying that, you know what, I don't really like this show. It makes me feel kind of down. I'd rather watch something else. Or even like, what are we going to have for dinner? Instead of always choosing to go to a restaurant that other people are choosing, or making a dinner that other people would enjoy, just giving yourself some space to have your needs met in those areas as well can be really great training ground for learning to own your voice a little bit more without totally dumping the boat all at once.
I love these. These are such good things. And, I think for some of us, we'll hear what you're saying, like these examples, and you're like, who does that?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of how I feel. I'm like, what? Like, people do that. But, I think that we have to remember we're all at a different place.
Yeah.
And we all, like, what seems easy for one person might be a really difficult thing for another person. And when we can really support each other in this and encourage each other, like as women, as sisters, right? I feel like we're all sisters. We're in this sisterhood. Like, let's lift each other up and let's encourage each other instead of, gossiping behind someone's back because of a decision they're making. Like, let's really hold hands together and do this together and remind each other how important it is to take care of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You raise a really good point about being at different stages of the journey. So it's very worthwhile to just kind of pause and reflect on what baby steps might look like for you. We always have to take into consideration our starting point, right? And I think that, even circling back to when we're talking about this sort of like boundaries being selfish, for instance, not everybody is going to have this particular issue where they do overgive and they don't claim their own desires. So for instance, if you're totally down with, absolutely doing your own thing all the time, and maybe it's like burning bridges and messing up relationships, perhaps you've got a different starting point, and you've got to approach your growth from a different angle. But absolutely for people who are starting from a place of feeling like they're kind of going through the motions or letting other people call all the shots, and you find that the things that you used to be passionate about, you just don't have space for them in your life anymore. Like if your calendar is not your own, if your resources don't feel like they're available to you for things that matter to you, then it's worth taking a closer look at what areas in your life you might be able to take some baby steps there.
Well, so let's talk about like what it actually looks like in real life to set boundaries. I think it's sort of, we know generally what that means, but like, can you give us some specific examples of what setting a really healthy boundary around a particular desire we have might look like?
So I think to begin with, it's important to tune into what it is that you truly desire, and to notice when things aren't working for you in your life. So I know you're really big on the inner voice, and that's absolutely the starting place, is to recognize the difference between what my mentor Martha Beck calls your lizard brain. That's the kind of more primal part of the brain that's built to fear, lack, and attack, and is really just kind of that tied to our stress response and wanting to keep us safe, but doesn't always have our best interest at heart. So noticing when we're starting to give a lot of airtime to our inner lizard, to the voice that's really just trying to make us stay in our lane, versus going deeper and maybe listening to the more subtle or nuanced voice. And I do a lot of work helping women to connect with messages that come up from the physical body in order to be able to understand that, because I think that resonance is really huge, right? So like our minds can convince us of anything one way or the other, but when we really tune into sensation inside our bodies, that's when we're able to get a clearer picture of what's really true for us, like minus the social conditioning, minus what we think we're supposed to be doing. It's like, if I could trust that everybody was going to support me and nothing would blow up, what would I really want to do? That's kind of a good entry point to start to get some clarity around, what might matter. And also looking at your values too, and where your life maybe isn't lining up with your values. These are really good entry points to discover what that thing might be in the first place.
I love what you say about tuning into your body, because I really feel that for a lot of women, for most women really, that's an entry point to listening to our inner voice. Because I think when people hear me say inner voice coach, or listen to your inner voice, they're like, mine is really mean to me. And I'm like, no,
there are a couple of voices, not that one.
Not that one, but like really paying attention to the signals your body gives in any given situation, or when you have a particular thought, or when you're having a decision to make. I tell people to try it on and see what it feels like, just like you would go into a dressing room and try on something before you bought it. Try on that feeling, try on that decision. And what does your body say? Is it too tight? Is it itchy? Does it make you feel gross? Or does it make you come alive? Does it make you feel excited, which is different, a different feeling from like that bad kind of, like, I feel like there's two different kinds of excitement, like the good excitement or like the, I'm terrified kind of excitement. But our bodies can really share that information with us. And that is another way that we can connect with our inner voice.
Absolutely, for sure. I think that's really fundamental in terms of being able to start uncovering our next steps, because, you know, until that's around that same point in my life, in my early 20s, I really navigated everything from the mind only. But then around that time as well, I heard this quote that said, make the little decisions with your head and the big ones with your heart.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and I didn't know what it meant at the time, but I knew. Like, so speaking of inner voice, I'm like, I don't know how to do that, but like there's something to this and it feels really important.
Yeah.
You know, so that was kind of like my inner voice. The fact that it felt so magnetic to me, that concept, that idea. It's like there's some truth here and I can feel it. I don't know what it means for me yet, but there's something there. So, you know, it's the difference between making choices and pursuing goals from a purely logic-based place or just strategy versus actually listening to your deeper desires. So like another example, going back to that same period in my life, it's so rich with different examples for me. Before the awakening, as it were. Not that it's all gravy now, but at the same time, this is around the time that I started to learn about this stuff and started to switch gears. You know, I chose my university program from a very logic-based place. And it's funny because it's like the universe was knocking on my door and wanting me to think bigger. I did get a scholarship for my program that was local, so I was able to move into residence, which was part of what I wanted to do and have like a fun kind of an experience from that perspective. But I had also applied to a bunch of different things. So I applied to this program that was happening in England, and only 40 people in the country would be accepted to it. It was kind of funneled through some local universities here, but the idea was that you did 1 year abroad in this castle, and it was the same kind of program as the one that I did enroll in ultimately, like same academic content. That sounded amazing, but it was so much money, and I just immediately wrote it off. Yeah. I was like, oh well, I don't have $30,000 to do this, so forget it. I didn't even consider it, even though it's quite an honor to be chosen for something like that, and that would have been so cool. But it didn't feel logical to me. It didn't feel like it made any sense, and so I just didn't consider it. And then at the same time, so like school started, and I get a letter in the mail, unsolicited, from Cornell University being like, hey, we noticed that you're pretty good at track and field. We want to talk to you about scholarship opportunities. And track wasn't even my main event, right? It was like I was on 8 school teams and did all the things. But it wasn't even my strongest thing. And I knew nothing about my academics, which were even stronger than my athletics. And did I even follow up? No. Oh, I didn't even give myself the space, because I was like, oh, well, I've already started school. American school is so expensive. And like, I don't know, track is not my strongest thing. So the scholarship probably wouldn't be that significant or significant enough. And really at the end of the day, though, I was still with that guy at this time. And so really it was this feeling of not giving myself permission to do what I wanted, because it would have meant something would shift in my relationship, and I felt guilty.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah.
This is so fascinating. When you were talking, it reminded me of a very similar story in my life, where I applied and did get accepted to a program in England, a postgraduate program that only 6 people every year get accepted to for flute. Wow. And I applied for a Fulbright scholarship to go, and I didn't get the Fulbright. And so I was like, well, I guess I'm not going. Like, I didn't even try to make it work, to figure it out. Yeah. And I think, looking back, I regret that. And I share that story a lot with my flute students. Like, don't let like money or like the idea of like you don't think this is possible keep you from trying. Yeah. Because you don't know what's possible. Like, we don't know the answer to that. And if we assume that we do, we're in big trouble, because the universe is so much bigger than we can ever even imagine. And if we limit possibilities to what we can imagine in our mind, oh my gosh, like you might as well just like turn around and go home. I just feel like we're limiting ourselves so much. And we do that, like you said, you do that because you think your relationship won't last. Like that's just another possibility. You weren't even able to see that possibility from where you were. So it's like, well, how would that ever work? Oh, well.
Yeah.
And it's going back to like the desire piece, right? Like what do we really want?
Yeah. Yeah. And I really wanted those things, and I didn't give myself the space to explore it, to see what might be possible, like you said. And also, just as a little sidebar, how many more things could you and I have in common, by the way?
I know, right? Well, and I went to grad school at Ithaca College, which is where Cornell is, which is also weird. Yeah.
Okay. This is
crazy. We have like lots of similarities, except I'm a little bit older than you, I think.
I don't know, maybe, but I'm older than people think, so you never know.
Yeah, well, okay, so I'm really interested for you now, having really practiced this in your life for a while, this tuning in to your desires. What does your personal practice of tuning into your desires look like?
Yeah, so the first thing is to unplug, like back up, step away from the laptop, step away from the noise, step away from commitments, and just be still and quiet. And for me, that means meditation, and also doing things where I'm inside my body. So I was at a conference recently, and it was interesting because I always love it when I stumble upon research that backs up things that I kind of just inherently know based on my anecdotal experience. And so it seems to me that because I do so many things that are body-based, like I really love to work out, as you know, we both do CrossFit, because I love yoga, and it's really important to me to be moving, and that really gives me kind of a felt sense of my own presence. It was interesting, and I always thought that kind of strengthened my ability to hear my inner voice as well, because I do so much body-based stuff, which is increasing the neural connections between mind and body, right? And so I was at the Canadian Positive Psychology Association's annual conference, and I can't remember the name of the speaker right now, which is embarrassing, but in any case, I can't remember her name right now, but she said that would actually be kind of miraculous if I randomly remembered her name out of thin air, so I'll give myself room for that. In any case, she is in England, and she's a PhD and researcher, and in her research she's found that the more that people do physical activity, the more they just inherently take better care of themselves in other parts of their lives as well.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it just kind of
although
follows.
It doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. Right. I know that you do a lot of this body-based stuff too, right? And even performance for you, like playing the flute, that's something that is inviting your body into the conversation.
Oh yeah. I feel it's interesting. I was just talking with a conductor today about this, about how for me, flute is a physical discipline. And, as a conductor, what he does is very, heady. Like it's not as physical. Like he's not like practicing conducting. He's like listening and going through and, making decisions about the music through score study. And it made me realize like, oh, I really need that physical discipline for me to get it. Like I get things through my body. Yeah, absolutely. And the reason that I love that so much is that, the elephant in the room is that this stuff feels really big, and it feels like it's hard to know where to start. And it feels like if you even begin in the first place, then maybe you're going to capsize the whole boat, which can be daunting. But that's why I love the fact that even just engaging in physical activity regularly, whatever discipline feels good to you, like dance is wonderful as well for the idea of like self-expression and fluidity and movement, but really whatever the modality is that suits you, that's going to help to strengthen your connection in the first place. I also like to conduct little experiments. We were talking a little bit before about like trying on a decision, and this is absolutely something that I do in my life and that I do with my clients as well. And
it's really tuning into your body wisdom, right? So it's like, what is my body saying about this? So if I don't feel clear in my mind, if it's cluttered and arguing one way and then the other, I get really still. I try on a decision and I notice what happens inside my body. Mm-hmm. Do I have a feeling of expansion, lightness, openness, or do I have this feeling of shutting down or tension or freezing? It's kind of like a game of warm or colder, or hot and cold. Did you play that game ever when you were a kid?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Like where your mom hides something and you have to, yeah.
And then they tell you if you're getting closer, then it's warmer. And if you're getting further away, then it's colder. Yeah. So it's like an internal game of hot and cold.
That's so interesting. I love that. I've never thought of it like that before, but you're exactly right. Like go towards the thing that feels good.
And I love that too, because again, it's not about knowing the answer right from the beginning. It's not about having it all perfectly planned out before you even start. It's just noticing what feels a little better, or what feels like it's pulling you away from yourself.
Well, and you know what I love about that too? It's we don't have to know the answer before we begin. Like there's not a requirement. And sometimes I think that the perfectionist in us really wants to know the answer, and it's okay to not know. And if you give yourself permission to not know, then you also give yourself permission to find what feels right, instead of doing what you think you should do, or, just going with what your head says or going with the logical place. So it's about like giving yourself permission to also, and what comes with that, let's be real. What comes with that is you have to give yourself permission to sometimes make the wrong decision. Mm-hmm. And that's okay too.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Making mistakes can feel painful, but it's absolutely essential if we're going to get to the fulfillment that we so deeply desire in our lives. They say that the most successful people just fail more often and more quickly and bounce back,
Yeah, they have that resilience. Yeah. Oh, well, I totally love the direction that this conversation took. Who knew that talking about boundaries would be so fun? Well, you did.
I did.
So I'm so glad that you came on, Brigid, to share your experience and your wisdom with us. I really, really appreciate you and all of that you're doing and bringing into the world. And I'd love for you to share with my listeners how they can find you, how they can connect with you and learn more about what you do.
Absolutely. So they can find me on my website, BrigidDineen.com. I'm on social media. I mainly post on Facebook and Instagram, and I think that you're going to have the links for people there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then one fun thing, so because this all feels heavy, I fully acknowledge that, right? And so I did also create a resource that people can use in order to approach this with a little bit more lightness. And it's a PDF guide called Lighten Your Load, and it guides you through how to take 5 simple steps to reclaim your time and your energy. And I think it's a really good place to start because, again, it takes you through that process of finding some low stakes thing where maybe you're not, owning the fact that you don't want to do something or you do want to do something. And it guides you through the process of being able to make that little shift, that first little step, to give yourself a little bit more freedom in your life. So they can find that on my website as well, BrigidDineen.com/lighten your load with dashes in between each word.
And we'll put all of that in the show notes, and there will be live links right in the podcast app that you're listening to. So you can look right down on your phone right now, as long as you're not driving, and click over and get all of that good stuff.
Oh, and also, how can I not mention my own podcast?
Right.
You can totally hang out with me there too.
Yeah, and like I said, I was on in the beginning of July, and so we'll link to that episode too, so you guys can go listen to that. I was talking about one of my favorite topics, perfectionism.
Yes. So much wisdom. You shared so much truth, and I really think it's going to be really valuable to a lot of people. So if you struggle with perfectionism, check it out.
You got to live it to give it. I love that little phrase that you said. So, Brigid, I have one last question I want to ask you, and that is, in your life currently, what is your inner voice asking of you?
That's a good question. Right now, my inner voice is asking me to not be so rigid about the way I'm approaching my goals. Lately, I've noticed that especially for my business, I've fallen into the rabbit hole of strategy quite quite deeply. And whereas strategy is really important to have, you also have to have heart. And so for me, I'm recognizing that I kind of went a little bit too far, and I've got to loosen the reins a little bit, give myself some breathing room, give myself some space to explore things in my own way from the inside out, rather than necessarily trying to follow someone else's blueprint. So, these things come up in different ways in our lives all the time. And I feel like I'm doing a good job of living my life that way. But sometimes still, when it comes to my business, I tend to fall into that as well.
Oh, I love that so much. And I think that that's so true, and so true of all of us. Like, there is always another layer that can be peeled away, that can be burned away, to reveal even more of who we are. And when we allow that to happen instead of judging it, that's when we really find freedom and joy and love and all of those feelings that we want to be feeling every day. So, Brigid, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I just want to honor your creativity. Like, I love having creative souls on the podcast with me, and I know we didn't talk much about that, but I know it's a big part of what you do. And thank you for being willing to share your stories and your wisdom with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Kelly. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Sometimes at the end of an interview, I wish that I could see all of you listening to it and be like, if you have experienced the need to set a boundary, can you please raise your hand? And then to see everyone raise their hands, because I know this is resonating with you guys. I know that when you hear someone talk about getting in tune with your desires, there's something in you that's like jumping up and down and saying, yes, I want that. And I think that sometimes when we talk about setting boundaries, it feels what's the word? Like, it feels like it has to be like super rigid, and that it has to be like, yes, just no, or yes, or that you might have to be almost like mean to keep these boundaries. But really, I think the kinds of boundaries that we're talking about are personal boundaries. They're boundaries that you give to yourself, not necessarily to someone else. They're to support you and to support your dreams. They're boundaries around what you will say yes to based on what you desire, based on how you feel. They're your boundaries. And I just love this conversation. And here's the thing. I can't see you raise your hand and say, yes, this applies to me, but you can reach out to me. And a great way to do that is to screenshot your podcast app, whatever you're listening to now. Take a screenshot of you listening to this and share it on social media and tag me and let me know what you thought. Let me know if this is making a difference in your life. And this is great because I can see those hands being raised and know that this stuff matters to you guys. And also, it's a reminder to everyone else who is connected to you or connected to In Her Voice. Oh yeah, I need to go listen to that. And I really appreciate you guys spreading the word and sharing this message, because it is so important. So don't forget, be sure to go over to kellycovert.com/newsletter, get your name and your email on the newsletter list so you don't miss out on anything. And tag me in any pictures you have of you listening to the podcast. And I can't wait to see everybody's stuff popping up. I am at Kelly J. Covert on all of the socials. So that's the best way to hit me up. Remember, you matter. Your desires matter. What you want matters. And it's okay to want what you want. You are worthy.